questions. I will now turn it over to Representative Carter.
And I am having technical difficulties. I apologize. If you could please have the next speaker go on.
We will turn it over to Representative Julie Rogers.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, in addition to serving as a state representative, I've also practiced as a physical therapist for over 20 years. And throughout my career, I have treated many auto accident survivors. While it has really been a privilege to help rehab these individuals, many have severe, complex, and often lifelong complications that take more than a couple of weeks in physical therapy. This is because auto accident survivors don't always have linear, singular injuries like one broken limb. More often, their injuries involve complex, interrelated systems that require rehabilitation like motor planning, speaking and swallowing, autonomic nervous systems regulating one's mood, and relearning basic life skills like using the restroom or transferring from a bed to a chair, often with the help of very specialized medical equipment. This often requires years, not months, of rehab. One patient that I assisted sustained a traumatic brain injury resulting in impaired memory. She required extra repetitions of instructions, written, detailed home exercise plans, and she needed additional time to finish activities because she had trouble recalling the task I had just asked her to complete. Both of her legs were fractured. I think one had an open wound. She had broken ribs, a punctured spleen, and required oxygen to breathe. But not every injury is available on the surface. She also had socio-emotional related issues when she was in a setting with bright lights, and often having other people around would increase her anxiety. She could not be left alone and needed specialized 24/7 care. I could share dozens of stories just like this one, stories of resilient people dealing with extremely challenging circumstances. Here's the thing, their needs are complex and very unique to their individual situation. Cookie cutter approaches won't cut it. And that's often the reason why I lose sleep at night, because I worry about their futures. Highly skilled, individualized care is invaluable to their quality of life. And now is not the time to turn our backs on them. I understand the relationship between healthcare providers, patients, and insurance companies all too well. Insurance companies are coming off of a year with historic profits during the year of COVID-19, yet they're walking away from Michiganders. They're failing to invest in the care of their policyholders injured in auto crashes. That's why I'm here today. I'm here to take a stand for Michigan's auto accident survivors, their providers, and their families. I'm here to call for putting healthcare ahead of record profits. Against the backdrop of record-shattering profits across the country, Michigan's largest auto insurance companies are the only winners when it comes to this new fee schedule. This is despite the fact that Michigan residents have been faithfully paying their premiums year after year and upholding their end of their agreements. As of July 1st, the new fee schedule will go into effect, which will only reimburse rehabilitation providers at 55% of what they were charging in January of 2019. These rehabilitation centers, most of which are local small businesses, will not survive a 50% pay cut. Some are already reporting that they plan to lay off their staff and close their doors on June 30th, giving pink slips to frontline care providers and throwing the vulnerable, gravely injured accident victims they care for into complete disarray. This issue is simply too serious to ignore any longer. It's a crisis. The House and Senate insurance companies must act immediately. Now I will turn it over to Representative Brenda Carter.
Thank you, Representative Rogers. And thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for this very important discussion about protecting some of Michigan's most vulnerable residents. After more than a year of living in a world changed by the coronavirus, there is one theme that we as Michiganders have returned to each and every week: what we need to do to be protected. Protection. Each and every one of us has a drive to protect ourselves and those we love. We protect ourselves in different ways. During COVID surges, we stayed at home, and when we went outside, we put on a mask. During the flu season, we went to our doctors for a flu shot. And each year, whenever it's time for us to renew our auto insurance, we take a look at those papers and we pay our next invoice to ensure that we are protected in the event of an accident. The act of buying auto insurance is an agreement. Drivers agree to pay their premiums. Auto insurance companies agree to provide the stated benefits in the event of an accident, whether it's a fender bender or something more serious. In 2011, our son Christopher died of a catastrophic brain injury. He was in the hospital for almost 2 weeks with his brain swelling. In 2019, our son Brian died of a catastrophic brain injury. I know as a parent how important it was to have the insurance, something I didn't have to worry about while going through this trauma. I shudder to think what our family would have had to do if that insurance had not been available. In 2019, the Michigan legislature came to a bipartisan agreement to reform auto insurance in our state. There were many, many provisions in Public Acts 21 and 22, which Governor Whitmer signed into law 2 years ago this month. This historic auto reform package was designed to provide lower auto insurance rates while protecting the standard of care for those in auto accidents. But auto insurers have not been complying with the intent of the law. It's unfortunate, but that's exactly what's happening. Insurers are fighting every step of the way to avoid paying for care promised in auto insurance policies. That means premiums we paid for, we are getting less than what we were offered. In fact, the situation is so dire that unless we take legislative action, thousands of vulnerable auto accident victims will lose the care they need to thrive, and in many cases, to survive. And I would now like to turn this over to Leader Donna Lasinski.
Thank you, Representative Carter. I'm going to ask Doug Heller to share some perspective from an expert point of view and analysis of our market. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Leader Lasinski. I'm Doug Heller. I've been asked to share some of the research I've been doing with Consumer Federation of America regarding the profitability of the nation's auto insurance carriers. Given the discussion we just heard from Representative Carter and Rogers, I think the unprecedented national profits in the industry provides really important context as lawmakers consider how to address the looming problems for auto no-fault, especially as industry seems resistant to making any fixes that would improve outcomes for accident survivors. If insurers are going to say that they can't afford to correct the flaws in the 2019 legislation, then understanding their 2020 profits becomes an extremely relevant set of data. While so many Michiganders and folks across the country faced incredible personal and financial struggles associated with the pandemic, the auto insurance industry will likely look back on 2020 as its most profitable year ever. There are a combination of factors that created such a windfall for insurers, but it all starts with the pandemic itself. because so many of us were stuck at home, either because our offices were closed, our businesses shut down, we were laid off, or we suddenly needed to stay home with kids who weren't in school. We weren't causing nearly as many accidents as is normal. Now, you'll hear that there was a small jump in the number of high speed and fatal accidents last year. But it is hardly a footnote in terms of claims payments compared to the dramatic reduction in accidents and claims overall during the pandemic. So everyone's premiums were based on expectations set before COVID shut down the country. And what that means is, in essence, auto insurance became overpriced overnight sometime last March. Now, the Department of Insurance and Financial Services actually did the right thing early on and ordered that insurers make refunds of the sudden excess in premiums for the first 2 months or so of the pandemic. But they didn't demand insurers give back all of the unnecessary premiums that they had collected, and DIFs didn't order insurers to continue the rebates as the pandemic dragged on and accidents remained historically low. Because insurers were content to make only a partial short-term refund to consumers back in April and May, and because Michigan's regulators and most others around the country, with the one exception of California's insurance commissioner, because most regulators didn't insist on getting more back to consumers, the pandemic gave industry a massive windfall that they've been parading around Wall Street every quarter. So I'm going to bring up a little summary slide and then detail for you a few of our findings. Just to be clear, these are national profits for some of the largest auto insurers that have significant market share in Michigan. So I'll start with the largest insurer in Michigan, Progressive. In 2020, Progressive raked in a 43% increase in its net income compared with 2019, netting about $5.7 billion. And that's after accounting for the premium refunds made early in the pandemic. What's most revealing to me is that while they ended up refunding about 2.5% of customer premium last year, they gave their shareholders more than double that amount in the wake of 2020. In January of this year, Progressive paid out what appears to be its largest ever annual dividend to shareholders, worth about $2.6 billion paid out to its investors. Now, moving on to State Farm, Michigan's second largest insurer. State Farm is not a public company, so it doesn't report to the SEC. But in its annual report, State Farm's data showed that its auto insurance business had an underwriting profit of $1.7 billion after accounting for its COVID refunds. Now, underwriting income or underwriting gain is calculated before accounting for all the income that insurers earn by investing our premiums. And that's where their profits typically come from. They don't need to make an underwriting profit on the insurance business because they make so much investing our premiums. And in fact, even though State Farm has been financially solid for decades, the company only reported a positive underwriting gain once in the last 10 years until 2020. And the $1.7 billion underwriting income last year was 50% better than that one other positive underwriting year in the decade. Now, I'm going to come back to State Farm in a moment, but let me just share with you a little bit about Allstate, which is the fifth largest carrier and also a public company. Allstate doubled its auto insurance underwriting income last year, taking in $3.4 billion, again, after accounting for its pandemic premium credits. In fact, it had its highest company-wide net income in at least 20 years. Like Progressive, Allstate has been handing out shareholder dividends like candy, recently announcing first and second quarter dividends to investors that were 50% higher than the prior year and which appear to be the largest quarterly dividends ever paid by the company. And last on my list, the sixth largest insurer in Michigan is Citizens, which is owned by the Hanover Group. And in its SEC filings, it reported personal lines insurance income before interest and taxes that were 47% higher than its 2019 gain, also after the the refunds that it paid. Now, while this company doesn't break out their profits by auto insurance segment, auto represents 2/3 of its personal lines income, and the $212 million in personal lines operating income Citizens' parent company made in 2020 made it its highest earnings year in at least a decade. So again, the question that I think this brings up as lawmakers consider what reforms are needed to auto no fault is, how are the auto insurance companies dealing with these record windfall born of the pandemic and taken from the pockets of policyholders? What we see here is company after company raking in huge profits with so much to spare that there's been a fire hose of money being spent on givebacks to Wall Street investors. But I mentioned I would come back to State Farm. And that's because a recent article in the Financial Times publication, a trade publication called P&C Specialist, they reported that State Farm's CEO was paid an $18 million bonus in 2020 to bring his annual pay to over $20 million, which is just about double what he had been paid prior to the pandemic. So just to wrap it up, Progressive and Allstate are doling out dividends to investors. Citizens announced record results, and State Farm's CEO cashed in on the pandemic. But when the policyholders of Michigan need some assurances that if they survive a terrible accident, there
Thank
will
you,
be care
Doug.
for them.
We're running out of time, so
Oh.
we're going to pass it to Representative Lazinski.
Sure thing. Thank you.
She's muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doug. I'd like to close today's press conference by highlighting the urgency around this issue. By July 1st, when this rate impacts, this fee schedule goes into effect, many of these seriously injured patients will have no place to go. And that's only 5 weeks away. Up to 6,000 Michiganders are at risk, and letters are already going out notifying them that they need to find alternative care. When the original acts around auto no-fault reform were set, this reimbursement schedule inadvertently rewarded folks who were charging high rates by cutting these rates by 55%. But if you were charging a reasonable rate, you took that same cut. And these good providers can no longer provide care under the schedule that's coming July 1st. We cannot take a wait and see approach with people's lives, and we need actions now. As we just discussed, auto insurance companies are not struggling in this moment. And this is not about hobbling or hurting the insurance companies. That's not what is at play here. Right now, thousands of Michigan residents who have suffered long, life-changing injuries are terrified that they will no longer have access to the care that they need. And because the current law rewards those who were overcharging and punishes those who provided good care and were charging fair rates, we are going to see Michigan residents not have the care that they need. I want to be clear, this is not a Democratic or a Republican issue. This is a human issue. We passed auto insurance reform in a bipartisan manner, and we can pass this simple fix in a bipartisan manner as well. We have the opportunity to do this now. We need to get around a table. We need to meet these clear objectives, a cost-neutral, narrow fix to the fee schedule. We need to protect our most vulnerable, and we need to make sure we maintain the critical care provider network that we have today. There is a bill in the House, there is a bill in the Senate right now that has a starting point, that has a way to accomplish this. And we can make that legislative fix now and before July 1st by all coming together around the table to get this done. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to your questions. Andrea?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Now I would like to welcome any questions from the media. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. And please provide your name and news outlet before asking your question.
Hi.
Michael Martin.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for doing this. My name is Michael Martin from Fox 17 in Grand Rapids. My question is, I've been looking into this issue for the past few weeks here, and it seems like a talking point for some folks on the Republican side of the aisle who do not wish to look at this prior to the July 1st deadline, are standing on the basis that this, as it stands right now, that the no-fault auto law will invite new business to the state and will contain loopholes within it that allow existing companies to close their doors and reform as new companies to function within the state. Is there any truth to this that from your perspective, and do we expect in any regard this to invite business rather than shut down businesses as seems would happen?
House Leader Lozinski.
Thank you for that question, Michael. It's layered and a little bit complex there. Let me take a couple aspects of that I can right now. One, our automotive insurance landscape here in Michigan is very competitive. We know that in other areas of our lives around high-speed broadband internet, we're happy if we have one or two choices. In auto insurance, we have over 80 companies providing auto insurance plans here in Michigan. May I please ask for a clarification of your question around, are you asking about the provider network ending and reforming or auto insurance companies ending and restarting?
In particular, I mean in-home care companies. The companies that will struggle because they'll only be reimbursed, half of what they previously were by insurance companies. When talking about those companies closing our doors, it's been suggested to me by some lawmakers that, well, those companies can just close their doors and then reopen on July 2nd or July 3rd and create a new set of fee schedules. Does that make sense to you? And is that something that companies should be considering?
Thank you. And I appreciate that question. That is absolutely a ridiculous formula for attempting to stay in business as a company. What we are looking for is a sustainable model here in Michigan that provides a clear fee schedule that is fair to all providers. So regardless of what you were charging as a fee, as it is in all other aspects of the auto insurance reform, it doesn't matter what one hospital charged, what one outpatient facility charged for care that was already described and already had a billing rate. They all receive the same reimbursement. It is this niche of long-term complex care for traumatically injured people that is set based on what they charged previously. That doesn't make sense. It rewards bad actors who are charging the very high fees, and it punishes the good actors who are providing quality care at a reasonable cost by cutting them each in half. So the bad actors continue to make a lot of money. The good actors are unable to survive, and thousands of Michiganders are likely to be left without care. So if what the situation you're describing is that we should have our good actors dissolve their companies, come back as new companies, charge very high fees to then be cut in half, that is not a workable solution. That is not what Michiganders are looking for. They're looking for a way to maintain our provider networks, to pay fair and reasonable reimbursement rates, and to keep in business all of the critical care providers that care not just for automotive injury accident victims, but for all traumatically injured people across Michigan.
Thank you so much.
I agree with Leader Lozinski. And the thing I will bring up is that we're not talking about companies making widgets. We're talking about people's lives. And a company currently health providers and in-home care, as Michael mentioned, they have to send out notices to the families if they intend to close. So this is not just a simple turn a switch on and off type of a thing. It's very serious. And these patients' lives are at risk. And if the provider's in-home care settings close, there's a couple of options. One, hospitalization, which is extremely expensive, or long-term care facilities that might not be the ideal setting for a complex brain injured patient.
Thank you so much.
Question, please. WHMI.
Hi, this is John King at WHMI. To Representative Lozinski or anyone, can you maybe provide more detail on how the fixes that are being proposed will be cost neutral?
Representative Lozinski.
Thank you for the question. Yes, so when we look at the other parts of the auto no fault reform that went into place, we were able to set a single rate for clear items of care, things that already had billing codes in the system. And we did that by setting one single fair rate, and it was approximately 200% of Medicaid rates. In this area of complex care for traumatically brain injured folks, are often not clear one-to-one billing codes for these services that were offered because they are so complex and interconnected. What we worked very hard to do, and what the legislation, both the House and the Senate bill do, is propose a fee schedule that mimics the 200% of Medicaid rate. By doing that across the board, it keeps that cost impact neutral, because it doesn't take the very high rates, which were lowered, but are still above an equivalent 200% of Medicaid rate there. And it takes the providers that were cut dramatically and just creates that level, fair and reasonable reimbursement rate for these situations. So it lowers the high cost and it makes fair the reimbursement rate for the quality care providers. And that's how it stays cost neutral, because it's lowering reimbursement for some and balancing reimbursement for others.
Next, we have Lauren Gibbons from MY.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having the call. I'm just curious at this point, I've spoken with some of the Republican leadership about this, and there doesn't seem to be any will at this juncture to take up this legislation. And I'm curious, what at this juncture, you and other lawmakers, I know there's a few Republicans on that are also interested in doing this, what could change legislatively between now and July 1st?
Representative Lizinski.
Thank you, Lauren. What we are looking at now is the reality of this in front of us. As Representative Rogers illustrated for us, there is a duty of care here. And so we are having families receive letters that say, we are no longer going to be able to provide for your loved one. We are going to need to close our business based on the fee schedule that will go in place and the dramatic cut on July 1st. And so I think it's been very theoretical up to this point, but now the reality is here. The letters are going out. Families are in desperate search of care. We're seeing more and more providers, as they do the math, that this fee schedule is going to be real, and it's cutting providers who are already providing quality care at a reasonable rate by half, that they simply can't stay in business. Lauren, we have to look at this in a holistic way here in our state. People are not going to find the care they need. People are going to be hurt. Families are going to have a hard time returning to work as they have to provide more hands-on care in their home. It's just going to create a negative domino effect across our state. And so we do have folks on both sides of the aisle who have a strong will to get to the table, to look at the starting point that we have in a House and a Senate bill and come to a solution here again that is cost neutral, that protects our most vulnerable, and that is in place prior to July 1st.
Are there any more questions? If there are no further questions, thank you for joining us.